Thank you for clicking on this video. Welcome, friends. Some love stories begin with a spark, others with a storm. But this one, it began behind the counter of a dusty little bookstore with a shy shopkeeper and a stranger who turned his world upside down. This is a story of finding love in the most unexpected places, about quiet people with loud hearts, and how one encounter can change everything. The rain came fast that Thursday morning, a stubborn, unyielding downpour that soaked through coats and turned sidewalks to silver slick reflections. But inside Shelter and Spine, a little second-hand bookstore tucked between a flower shop and a cafe on Cedar Lane, it was always warm. Eliot Hart, 32, quietly polished the brass bell above the door, its delicate chime echoing beneath the exposed beams. Tall, lean, with tired green eyes and hair disheveled in a way that seemed more forgotten than styled. He moved with the cautious grace of someone who never quite believed joy would stay. Books were his refuge, silence his sanctuary. He had run the shop on his own for 3 years since his father's passing. A life of dust jackets and anecdotes, not headlines or heartbreaks, and certainly not love. Eliot didn't mind. Not really. But then the bell rang. The door swung open, pushed by a gust of rain and wind, and in walked Julian Cade. He stood in the doorway like a frame from a lost film. Soaked from the storm, wind-blown black curls falling across sharp cheekbones, a leather messenger bag slung over one shoulder. His eyes a storm of their own, steel-gray piercing, restless. Eliot blinked. The stranger smiled. "Sorry, I didn't mean to bring the weather with me." His voice, low, scratched velvet, settled into Eliot's gut before he could reply. "You're fine," Eliot said, finding a smile. "Books like the rain. Makes them feel important." Julian chuckled, stepping inside, shaking out his coat. Drops landed on the hardwood floor, catching the soft lamplight like falling gold. That was how it began, with a storm and a stranger, and something Eliot couldn't name scrolling slowly across his chest. Hope. Julian came for the used poetry section, but he stayed for the conversation. Here turned the next afternoon, and the one after that, always at 4:30 sharp, always asking questions about obscure authors, about Eliot's recommendations, about Eliot. "What makes you smile like that? Like what? Like the world surprised you by being gentle?" Eliot laughed, but couldn't shake the question. They circled each other quietly for weeks. Eliot found himself counting down to 30, brushing his hair more often, occasionally wearing shirts not covered in invisible coffee stains. Julian noticed and noticed that Julian noticed. Julian had the kind of energy that filled a room, but only if you looked closely. He was kindness under leather, warmth behind wit, 1,000 secrets barely held together by charm. They were opposites yet the same. "You still don't believe I'm real, do you?" Julian joked one Thursday as they shelved a new shipment together. Eliot smirked. "You think you're a very convincing hallucination." "Close. I'm actually a freelance travel writer who got stuck here during a storm and decided to stay until he solved the mystery of the lonely bookseller." Julian's smile lingered longer that time. Eliot's heart skipped not in panic but permission. It wasn't just about books anymore. They took late evening walks past shuttered shops, ate pastries under String Lake courtyards, told embarrassing high school stories behind mugs of tea and coffee, shared shy glances during thunder and silence. One night, Julian lingered at the shop long after closing. Rain again outside, the street glistened like a dream. Inside, candles glowed in antique sconces. Eliot's idea of ambiance. They sat cross-legged on the floor as a jazz playlist hummed in the background. Julian's fingers trailed a dog-eared copy of The Picture of Dorian Gray. "I used to lie about who I was," Julianne said quietly. "We all do, don't we?" Eliot murmured. No, I mean completely, Julian continued. Changed my name when I left home. Hid everything. My voice, my past. Even the fact that I liked men. I wanted to be someone else, and until I didn't. Eliot looked at him steady. So who are you now? Someone who wants to see what peace looks like, what love looks like, if it's quiet. Julian answered, his voice almost breaking. Eliot reached over, fingers brushing Julian's wrist. You're not the only one who's been hiding. What followed wasn't a kiss. Not yet, just a moment, still in trembling. A breath hanging between two people who had lived lifetimes' insolence. It happened during the Harvest Festival. The town bloomed with music, cider, paper lanterns, and mold lauder. The streets danced. Julian made Eliot try caramel apples and glittering cider slushies. At one point, a flash mob of swing dancers filled the town square. Eliot stood back, skeptical, until Julian reached for his hand with an infectious grin. One dance? Eliot hesitated. People eyed the weight of visibility. But something inside him whispered, You're allowed, Joy. Even here, he nodded. One dance became 3. Laughter spilled from them like confetti. No one cared or stared, at least not in judgment, hand in hand. In public, kind of that night back at the bookstore, breaking tradition. Julian didn't leave right after the shop closed. Eliot didn't lock the door behind him either. Instead, they shared a long, quiet embrace by the poetry shelf. I'm so afraid of this, Eliot confessed. Being seen? Julian asked. Eliot nodded. The first time I came out, I lost more than I could replace. Then I'll help you build something new, Julian whispered. And this time there was a kiss. Deliberate, gentle, full of beginning. But even beautiful stories have shadows. Eliot woke one morning to an empty store. No Julian, no text, just silence. Hours passed. Then a day. Worry clawed its way in. Old instincts and the ones that hissed. You're unlovable. People leave. Returned on the second day. Eliot closed early and walked along the rain-lit streets, unable to focus. Heart pinched like a closing book. That night came a knock. Julian stood at the door, shoulder soaked, expression unsure. I had a panic attack, he admitted. I've never stayed anywhere this long. I didn't know if I could. You ran. I did. Why come back? Julian exhaled, took Eliot's hands. Because I'd regret the leaving more than I fear the staying. Eliot looked at him. Really looked. Julian was terrified. So was he. But love, real love, grew in risk. It bloomed where fear once rooted. Then let's figure it out together. Eliot said they didn't kiss this time. Didn't need to. They simply stood holding each other as the thunder once again tumbled above the town. The bookstore smelled like ginger tea and old pages. It was early, just after sunrise. Eliot stood at the back window watching streaks of gold light skim the quiet rooftops. Julian was still asleep on the worn leather couch, one arm draped over his eyes, the exhausted piece of someone still battling their storm. Eliot wasn't sure what to do, per se. Did this make them something now? Were they a thing? Part of him wanted definition. The other part was afraid it would snap like a twig under pressure. Julian stirred. Hey, he said sleepily, voice rough and real. Hey, Eliot replied, a small smile growing. I didn't think you'd let me stay last night. I didn't either. They both laughed, unsure if it was nerves or relief. Maybe both. Julian got up and padded barefoot across the floor. Does this bookstore have a shower, or is that only for employees of the month? Eliot grinned. You don't become shopkeeper of the year by sharing your shower. Julian stepped closer, eyes soft. So what happens now? The moment held. There was no right answer, only this one honest truth. We just keep showing up. Over the next few weeks, Julian started sharing more than poems. He helped Eliot rearrange the store, brought in plants that somehow didn't die, created new playlists for browsing customers, put chalk signs outside that made people smile. Customers loved him. So did the cat down the street, which Eliot found almost unfair. Julian was now staying above the bookstore in the empty spare room previously hoarded with old sci-fi novels and tax records. He helped clear it out, cracking jokes while sweeping away dust mites of the past. But their cleaning happened inside. They talked late into the nights and sometimes whispered things that hurt to say. Julian told him about the father who silenced him. A family who never accepted love unless it fit traditions, about the years he spent ruthless moving from city to city, always a guest, never a home. Eliot in turn told him about his first heartbreak, the man he thought would stay, who instead outed him to the town before vanishing. It took years to rebuild what little trust remained. "But you stayed," Julian said one night, his hand brushing Eliot's arm. "No, I hid," Eliot corrected. "You don't seem like you're hiding anymore. Maybe you gave me something worth being seen for." No kiss followed, just the soft interlocking off-fingers in the dim light. A different kind of intimacy. Love isn't always poetry. Sometimes it's mess. It happened on a Tuesday. The store was busy. Alcohol author had dropped in unannounced, and a surprise delivery showed up late. Julian was organizing end caps, Eliot at the till. They worked like clockwork until Julian Michelle's several rare collectibles in the wrong genre. Jewels. "I just finished inventory," Eliot said, maybe a little too sharply. Julian stiffened. "Sorry. I didn't know you had some sacred order to fantasy novels." The tension lingered. Customers noticed. After closing, they didn't speak for a while. Finally, "You snapped at me in front of 8 people, Julian said quietly. "I was stressed. I didn't mean to. I'm not mad at the mistake. I'm scared that we're becoming something I'll ruin." Eliot Zahid sat across from him on the old writing bench. "You're not ruining anything. We're both new to this. Being seen, loved, flawed." Both stared at the floor until Julian offered. "We need space to mess up without thinking it means the end." "I don't want space," Eliot whispered. "I want patience from both of us." They apologized. Instead of pulling away, they moved a little closer. Forgiveness isn't romantic. It's real, quiet, gritty, beautiful. Just when things felt balanced, life, as it often does, threw a wrench. The ex came in, Ben. He strolled into the store like a smile, wearing polished shoes. Tall, confident, apologetic in the performative way some exes are. "Wow, you kept the shop," Ben said, scanning the shelves. "You kept the condescension," Eliot replied, not missing a beat. Ben laughed. "Still funny." Julian watched from behind the counter. He knew who this was, Eliot had told him. But knowing and seeing are very different things, Ben leaned down. "You look good, Eliot. Healthier, happier." Eliot nodded. "I am. No thanks to me, huh?" Julian came over unbothered but firm. "You must be Ben. I'm Julian, boyfriend, rainstorm book addict." Ben raised a brow. "Well, I guess you leveled up." He left soon after. Charm failing Toland. That night, Eliot sat with Julian under the cafe lights. "That used to undome," Eliot admitted. "He doesn't scare you anymore." "Maybe it's because I finally let myself be loved for real," Julian whispered. "And I finally let myself stay." It was slow, tender, earned. The night they finally took the next step wasn't lit by mood candles or perfect playlists. It followed Amos' fired muffin recipe, a spilled cup all flour, and Julian dancing terribly in kitchen socks. They laughed so hard they cried. Then Julian just kissed Eliot, not hurried. Not careful, just right. Their connection deepened, passion blooming in small, electrifying touches, long glances and soft moans muffled by kisses that said everything their pasts never allowed. They stopped, checked in, kissed again, love unfiltered safe. They collapsed together on Eliot's no-crumb-covered couch, breathless but calm. "You're blushing," Julian whispered. "So are you," Eliot replied, pulling him closer. A year later, Shelter and Spine now hosted more than books. It had become a hub for community, queer artists, poetry nights, and on this particular morning, a small, unforgettable celebration. The front doors opened to reveal a garden of autumn leaves strung from the ceiling. Fairy lights twisted among worn shelves. Close friends filled benches between aisles. Eliot stood in a tailored forest green suit. Julian approached in black with a sprig of lavender in his lapel. The vows were short, but powerful. You helped me become someone who doesn't hide. You gave me a reason to finally stay still. Their first kiss as husbands echoed against the books, and somewhere in every worn page, every flickering candle, love whispered. He was just as Shopkeeper until he became someone's home. Love doesn't always crash in loudly. Sometimes it comes in quietly through open doors, crinkled spines, mismatched coffee mugs, and the courage to try again. Eliot and Julian weren't perfect, but they were real. Two souls who chose each other. Not because they had no fear, but because they finally had something worth breaking their walls for. And in the small town on Cedar Lane, between the pages and the rain, love found its story and it stayed.